Hi there, I'm Natalie, and welcome to Mark It Insights Marketing They Didn't Tell You. In this series, we'll dig into some of my absolute faves when it comes to marketing, such as branding, customer journeys, and brand loyalty. This features a special guest, Edward Quiseno, an amazing marketing manager and industry expert at Scholastic, a multinational publishing company, who will share some valuable information surrounding our topics. So let's get at it. All right. Well, hi, Edward. How are you?
Hi, Natalie. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for asking. Thank you so
Thanks.
much for taking the time to chat with me today. I
Yeah,
wanted
thank you for having me.
awesome. I just wanted to get a bit of insight from a bit of your perspective with regards to branding and possibly customer journeys or brand loyalty, anything in those areas. I just wanted to get your personal spin on those topics as an expert in the industry. So tell me, how did you get started in your career?
Well, mine was kind of accidental. I just graduated from college and trying to figure out how to incorporate my degree. So I double majored in women's and gender studies and visual arts. And so I was trying to figure out how to translate my skills and some of my passions into something tangible. What ended up happening is, you need to survive, you need a job. And I was like, well, I have graphic design skills. This company needs someone to sort of handle the social media and create some graphics and put them out there. I was like, I can do that. So I was fortunate enough to be able to land the job. And so then that's really where I formally got really introduced into marketing, the marketing world, in particular with publishing. So I work for I work in the publishing industry, and so there I was introduced to a very small team though, and so I've had a very interesting career in terms of marketing because I've been forced, and also it's been a learning curve to have to wear so many different hats. So I've done everything from helping design the graphics to ideating what a booth looks like, to figuring out what might be some of our target audiences. So you can say I've sort of like dabbled throughout the entirety of what the marketing field and branding scope can encompass. But I stayed there because I found that my creativity had, there was a channel there for my creativity that I was able to create from inspiration from the product. And I like that sort of exercise where I had to do a little bit of translation in my head of from something visual to something written, and then vice versa. So I don't know if I answered that accurately for you, but it's been it's been like a little roller coaster.
Well, that's interesting. Would you say that that would be something you're most passionate about with regards to branding and things like that?
I think what I'm most passionate about in this field is that there is a nook and there is a possibility for one of your skills to shine. You have to do the digging. But I do appreciate that sort of those nooks exist where my kind of thinking and the patterns that I see in things and how I'm digesting information and content and entertainment, how I can then distill that and create some sort of narrative. I think that's so interesting, and I find it interesting that other people can also do that and do it with different perspectives. So I think that's definitely where my passion lies in being able to find those little nooks.
That's awesome. I agree. So how has branding changed in the past few years? Or marketing or for you in terms of like your experience? How has that evolved within the past few years?
Um, I've broadened my perspective on what branding and marketing could be, um, and how it can also serve as it's a tool. Ultimately, it's a tool with goals attached to the end, right? And so you're trying to either change behavior or change perception, but it's a tool, and you can apply it to different things in life. And I think that's what I'm most that's the most interesting thing for me right now, and the direction that some of this is taken. but also to be cautious that it doesn't become, for example, with the Black Lives Matter movement, a lot of companies took it and just made it another marketing ploy to make money, to
Mm.
get people to come to them. And so, no, you know what I'm saying? Because it's not like that's someone's lived experience. You don't just get to just slap on, or like even Pride Month, you don't just get to slap on a rainbow flag and say, here, hooray, like it
Exactly.
needs to come with action. So like if you slap on the Black Lives Matter movement logo or wording anywhere around you, I better see you supporting bailout funds, and I better see you supporting all these other kinds of things. But it's not. It becomes very much about the imagery. So I think it's interesting that it's opening up to that, so where companies sort of take on some of these social movements. But I'm cautious because at the same time it's appropriation. You're appropriating for profit. But being aware of that is good, because then there are some of us that can figure out ways to contrast that, or figure out ways to really use marketing and branding in a way that's for social benefit rather than profit.
Hmm. In what capacity do you apply these tools that you mentioned?
um from everyday small things to like larger things, like positioning something to your friends you want them to do, you
Hmm.
know saying like, wouldn't you rather have a nice afternoon in such and such place instead of sitting under the smoldering heat. So um figuring out sometimes how to position things to your friends to get them to nudge to what you want them to do.
Get that.
um so definitely like in those small ways, and then I think it gets more complicated the bigger you get, um because then it's like broader strokes and broader messaging, hoping that different people catch
Right,
whatever kind of messaging you're getting at. And
right.
I think I've definitely learned a lot because my first language is Spanish, and then I learned English.
Mhm.
So trying like the translating in my head, the going back and forth. So I think that's been definitely like an interesting tool.
And how has the economy affected your industry?
Um, well, my industry in particular, the publishing industry, is already I don't want to say it's a struggling industry. Um, it is a low-paying industry with a people see the value in books. You know how industries essentially are rewarded by potential in a way.
Mhm.
So while books are revered, the potentiality of, I think the framing a lot in this country for a lot of industries is profit, 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 profit across the boards.
Mhm.
Um, and so I think the way that it's affected the economy's affected us is that we're trying to get books into the hands of people, or craft kits into the hands of people. And so we've been forced to go digital in a way that the industry wasn't necessarily, I think, as prepared. There's a lot of folks, there's a lack of educational integration, right? Where you have your older generations who are more equipped and more professional and more expert and better experts at sort of creating messaging, at figuring out bigger and better ideas, right? But then sometimes there's the gap between the tools that we have to use today. And so then understanding some of those avenues and how some of that functions. That gap got exacerbated by the pandemic, and then in turn the economy. And so then I think what happened is that as everyone tried to go digital, there's been a lot of learning curves. And so while we were somewhat profitable in the scheme of things, it was because of a pandemic. It was reactionary. You know what
Right.
I'm saying?
Yes,
It's
yes.
been a reactionary situation rather than a strategy that can sustain us. So I don't know. I feel like I don't give you straight answers.
No, no, you're
It's
doing great. This is great. This is interesting.
so I think it's a combination of things. I think like it's those different avenues coming out ahead, and then putting the publishing industry in an interesting situation as well, right? Because now it's like now the digital space is considered differently. Like, what are digital libraries? How do those function? Like,
Mhm.
who gets access to what, and how much is free? Like, all these questions are starting to really get pushed more and more to the forefront, especially because when you're selling books, you're not just selling books, right? You're participating in the network of it all,
Mhm.
whether it's libraries, schools, bookshops, and so it's thinking about those things as well. But yeah, I think it's been a mix of things that have affected that overall with
Mhm.
the economy.
What where do you see the publishing industry going from here in the future with I mean, now that everything has now tried to get back to somewhat normal, like pre-COVID and post-COVID kind of balancing act here, where do you see the publishing industry going specifically for you?
um, I think the pandemic is a very intense backdrop for what we've all had, right? Because it sort of created ripples and tensions across a bunch of different things that were also happening in society, right?
Mhm.
And the intense and sudden pause, really forced a lot of us to sit and really consider a lot of these things, whether we wanted to or not. We just had to. And so I think the publishing industry was forced to do the same, right? In
Mhm.
a lot of ways, I think industries overall don't reckon with what they're putting out into the world, because the mindset is just profit, and then with profit comes jobs and all that, but never with what is the intention, the holistic intention of the thing you're putting out there, right? And so if we're putting books out there, I think it really forced the publishing industry to consider, what are you putting out there? Like, who are you supporting? Who are you backing with your money and your the machine that you are, right? Because
Mhm.
you build networks, those networks build trust, that trust builds culture, and then that culture is sustained by the communities. And so industries are part of those networks of communities. And so I think what's happening is people are starting to, I'm hoping that the publishing industry is being much more critical of their position in that, right? Because we say literature is great for kids and for you to grow and learn, and education is key, and we have all these euphemisms and beautiful messages about reading and writing, and
Right.
but when that reading and writing is sort of for and by just a small group of people, you're doing a great disservice. And
Mhm.
so I think, again, my hope is that everyone's more critical about who and what we're supporting, and then the efforts that we're doing behind that to put stuff out there, right? Like in the marketing, I think there's a lot of unconscious biases, and then we don't put the money behind the people that deserve it, right? Because it's about, oh well, we don't think they'll do well, because then we're thinking about what is the status quo, and sometimes the status quo is a racist one or is a homophobic one. More often than not, is a combination of of those things.
Yes.
And so so yeah, so hopeful that they'll be more critical in what they're putting out there.
Yes. And with the digital landscape changing and all, you experiencing a different demand with in terms like with schooling and that shift where everyone's doing everything more digitally nowadays. Do you foresee like a a greater demand or a continuum from this point, but that's moving forward from COVID?
I think so. I think it's a how do I put it? It's going to become one of many more demands, but it's going to be a demand, because I think now that we were sort of deprived of experience, we're deprived of experience for the last year and a half. A lot of us turned to digital to give us that experience. Like Animal Crossing, I don't know how many people bought Animal Crossing, just trying to like live some sort of life. And so, and even a lot of companies, the way that they're putting out content for kids is very experiential now, very game like. So I
Oh,
think that's just going to keep increasing. We're going to keep pushing towards this um living fantasies in the digital space, right? Like the digital world is that magic essentially that we grew up learning about, like that is our wizard essentially in a lot of ways. And so I think with digital we have the demand is going to be like, give me an experience, right? If you're telling me you're selling me this brand and this product, what experience comes with that? How
Right.
can I experience you without having to be there with you? That's such a strange concept, but we've been doing it for a little while now, right? Like
Right.
it's still funny when I call my mom on FaceTime and I'm seeing up her nostrils, because she doesn't know how to like really use the camera. But
Right.
I'm seeing her, like, and
Right.
she's there. Whereas before it was like a phone call, you didn't know what was going on around them or necessarily, it's very different now. If she has something to tell me about and she can show me, will try to show me. But so it's things like that I think all of the small cultural things and nuances start adding up, and then
Right.
they build up into those bigger sort of demands from brands. We're always demanding, particularly in the US, we're always demanding an experience and a story, the two, always, all the time.
Mhm. And with that said, the customer journey has evolved too. Like now, people wanting that experience and wanting that interaction and that engagement, that also may have shifted your marketing in terms of how you market things and from the publishing aspect. Is that right?
Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely. And also who we look at, right? I think that power paradigm starting to shift a bit, where a lot of folks, instead of going to just, I mean, people still do go to a celebrity, right? Now you go to like influencers,
Right.
and then you go to a range of them, and then they hold different rankings within social rankings within everyone's sort of small sphere in their world, so
Right.
maybe you follow this person because they're a teacher, and so now they're a teacher influencer. They're not just a teacher, they're teacher and teacher influencer, creating content about education. So now I think more than ever, it's getting more and more nuanced. I think customer journeys need to be more, um, they need to be way more empathetic. Going back to what we were saying, right? It's
Right.
not worth us going through what we've gone to and not stop and reconsider all of it. Like reconsider the whole thing. The whole thing. You're upholding something and you're
Mhm.
not looking at where you might be, where you can even make just the slightest change so that a big shift happens.
Exactly.
No, everything is so reactionary.
Hmm.
So I think that's part of it too, right? I think a lot of the customer journeys for a little while are and have been reactionary. It's new territory. No one knows. A lot of this stuff is still settling down, and we won't know what that. And in looking at our customers, which would be just the general American public, at the end of June, there's going to be a moratorium lifted on evictions and foreclosures. And so, thinking about that as you're putting product out there, because wow, like if you create books, what can we do out there, right?
Right. Right.
Obviously a book isn't going to give you a home, but what can a book do in that cycle to help sort of prevent some of that? So at least personally, the way that I look at customer journeys go just a slightly just beyond the profit, because I think a lot of what's happened is like it's about community. Even when they talk about your Instagram community, like your followers, my followers, my community, I love you, so a lot of that language is happening and those ideas are going to start to get thrown around. So
Hmm.
I think the customer journeys need to get more empathetic. I hope they do. I'm not sure how they will evolve though for profit.
Right. Right. Because there tends to be, how do you say, when it comes to value, it may not seem as important, because they're out here to let's make that dollar, but then they lose the customer and what the purpose is and what the intention is for reaching that customer and making that meaningful and valuable connection with them. So in the long run, it's like you're losing out because of, trying to make a quicker profit, but then losing that customer and what is the real meaning and why are you presenting this to me? How does that impact my life? And how does that benefit me? and
Right.
in terms of content, it's so important. Um,
So that long lasting emotional connection, right? Like
yeah,
sustains things a lot of the times, right? Like, I mean, nostalgia's come back crazy. Everyone wants a reboot of something, but look at that. You know what I'm saying? Like
yes,
the power that that has too. So because we have these emotional connections with all these random brands that did something for us, like the
right.
Proud Family rebooting, or like Yes, or stuff like that. That just some of them got me excited. Some of them I'm like, ooh, leave me alone. but definitely, it's definitely very much about that personal connection. What are you building with those customers? And even honestly, I even think the way we talk about it has to change. There's such separation, as if everyone lives in these silos,
Yeah,
and then I give you a thing and then you don't come into my space. But like I'm a human that then goes out into the world, and then if you're, I don't know, a nurse that bought it, next thing you know you're my nurse. And like how, like I
yeah,
think we compartmentalize our lives so much. I think what would be crucial for our industry to evolve, or marketing and branding to evolve, is to break some of those compartments and look at how we all much more interconnected, and find what are the words or things that bring us together a little bit better.
that is wonderful. Well said. Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much, Edward. I
Yeah.
appreciate this valuable insight you share with me today. It's awesome, pretty awesome.
Oh, thank you for having me. I had a great time talking to you. I feel like this is the first time really I've had a conversation like this. So you made me feel like a professional.
No, you are. You're the ex. I've managed to like tap into different industries, but I've never gotten a spin on publishing. The way I've heard it from you today is just incredible. It's just an eye open.
Oh, thank you.
What you're doing is amazing.
Oh, thank you. I mean, at least I'm thinking about it. How much of it I get executed, I'm working on being a better executor.
Oh, you've got that. You've got that mindset. I mean, it's just like a higher playing field, so to speak. I don't know if I'm
Yeah.
saying it right, but you just the way you're strategically, the way you're thinking moving forward and how you're bringing all those elements together is really, really insightful.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that.
Amazing. Amazing.
Thank you.
Well, I hope we can chat again soon sometime. And thanks again
Yeah,
for having this time with me. I appreciate it so much.
absolutely. It was great. It was so good talking to you. It's very nice to meet you.
Hope you enjoyed this special clip. If you haven't already, let's stay connected. Subscribe to our newsletter for more tips and insights. I'm Natalie, and this is Market Insights. Until next time.